Hey, links in the chain. Welcome, welcome. I am one of your hosts, Dr. Lynne.
And I'm Justin. Yeah.
And we welcome you to Working It Out Across Generations. We have a great topic today.
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about are you caught in the middle of someone else's conflict? So we thought this was a very interesting topic, just as due to different relationship dynamics, due to, even work dynamics, or even just personal values that come up in conflict, right? I think there's times where we do either insert ourselves or we get inserted into other people's conflicts. And then from there, we feel we need to pick a side or anything like that. And I thought generationally, as far as just my general thoughts, I thought generationally this would be a very, very cool topic because personally, I thought, after a certain age, you don't really want to like insert yourself or be inserted in other people's issues and other people's conflicts. And yet I think that I've been awoken to the fact that that's not true. That's not really there's not really a timeline on that.
No.
Life is life. And, at times we're going to be thrown into stuff that we didn't have any intentions of being in. And at times our own body is going to put us in situations that, mentally we would have never thought to be put ourselves in. And so I thought it was really, really interesting just because I'd like to get some perspective generationally on how adults feel about possibly being in between two things or people that are conflicting, but clearly valuable to them. So
yeah, I mean, I think it's a big one for parents, right? If your kids are having a conflict and they insert you, we get inserted all the time when they're little, especially, but that happens. Your friends, there's so many ways that it can happen. And no, there are folks who do not outgrow it, who do not get the hint that they should not be in someone else's conflict. And I think also today, with everybody having a phone, and it seems like everybody has to be filming everything, we're already inserting ourselves into other people's conflicts.
Yeah.
So how far do some people go? Quite far. And it has nothing to do with age. It really is what you're used to. Even culturally, there's a reason to get involved if you're an elder or you're the oldest sibling, however it goes, right? Oldest child, that there are many ways that people can get in the middle of other people's conflicts. And I've seen, just doing conflict coaching, I've seen people who want out. How did I get into this? So even if you read, there's like the Dear Abbeys and that kind of, those are still the conflicts that people are writing in about. Like, I am in the middle of this conflict, and I either don't know how I got here, or I know I got here and I just really want to get out because it's just going on. And where everybody else was mad at each other, now they're mad at you. Maybe they just don't like the way you participated in the conflict, especially if they brought you in to take their side and maybe you didn't do that, or
Yep.
whatever, thrown fire on the flame, and it has gotten worse. So generationally, I'll talk about that. But right now, in terms of the topic, I think it is a good one. I mean, come on, you all out there, you know that right now you might be in the middle of somebody else's conflict, or you know you've been in the middle of somebody's conflict at some point, and it's not easy, but there are a lot of different reasons why people get into it, right? Sometimes people want you to play favorites. That's a reason that people will bring you into it, or you've inserted yourself into it because you're playing favorites. It can work both ways. Sometimes people want you to decide. Right. I mean, that's why they write into, like, Dear Abby, same thing. If it's a real life scenario in your own life, people want you to decide who's right, who's wrong. And then if you put yourself in it all the time, if you find yourself in conflicts, other people's conflict. One of the things that I know, some people are instigators. You might be one. If
that is true.
Right?
That is true.
You might be one if you started talking about one or both of the people in the conflict and made sure that that information got back to them. Then you might be an instigator, right? You might be an instigator if you just love drama and you love to see people go at it, and there isn't enough in your life to keep you happy, so you create it in somebody else's life. You might be an instigator if that happens. You've inserted yourself into the conflict because you need to have control. I know I'm that kind of person. I'm not inserting myself into conflicts, but I love to control, even in my thoughts, like what other people will do, mostly to keep the peace, but sometimes it's just about being in control, and you inserted yourself into the conflict. I guess I could say this for generationally, but back in the day, right, we called you just nosy. You just nosy. And it's easier to encourage nosiness today when everybody's got a camera and everybody feels like they've got a report on every single thing that is happening. Right. Look, if you got to film your food, you know you out there filming conflicts. I'm sorry. But
it's not even nosiness, is everyone's posting something. Right. So it's like, how are we even being nosy when the world is literally showing what the world is doing at all times?
Yes. So. Yeah. But it's definitely something that I know people are struggling with. So what about generationally? How does it play out for folks in your generation?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it plays out very, very easily. I think when I first started to think about this topic and, just what comes to mind, I started thinking about, kind of just like what you said in the beginning of, when you're young and you're small and, I know I have a sibling, a big brother. So anytime he beat me in a video game or he beat me in sports, right, I ran to my parents, right. And, we definitely had that dynamic. So I think for me, there's that part of this, which kind of sort of informs the middle school, high school part of like drama, which stuff happens and whatever. But I think just for a model like that gives you the idea or space to, if something happens or something comes up, especially revolving around your name, it's like going and finding someone who would, play that favorite, right? I think like that's a foundation that gets set through dynamics like that. And I think for me, where my brain went of that was just kind of like, okay, like those are periodic times in which, that's like guaranteed probably something that's going to happen, something you're going to have to deal with, something you're going to have to learn to maneuver. And you get your lessons in, and then you turn into an adult and you have things to worry about for yourself. You have other people to worry about, other circumstances to worry about.
You would think.
And I would think, right. And that's exactly what I thought, that over time, it's like, all right, well, why would I put myself in someone else's conflict, willingly, let alone, by accident, right? But it became one of those things where it's like, oh, I thought that was so kind of like not childish, but again,
Yeah.
maybe just for that period of time in our lives, developmentally, I thought that that's where things would end up and stay and land. But I'm noticing now just how much people do play favorites, right? Even in just the holding of space of two different opposing views or whatever it is, right? It's not really holding space when you're like saying to both sides, like, oh, like I really see what you're saying, or oh, I really agree with this, and I feel like you should stand on that. Like, that's not really the same as holding space, right? And so it's an interesting thin line to walk, in which I've learned, in those younger times, but also recently, and I say recently in the sense of like the past couple of years.
Right.
I myself found myself in a situation where I had actually inserted myself into a conflict,
Okay.
trying to look out for one of my boys in a social setting, right? And he's in an argument, caught up in something, right? Turned into like a little shoving match, but nothing crazy, nothing more than that. And turns out he knew the person that he was getting into it with, and they were having some heated but passionate conversation that they only know about and things of that nature. So when I come in trying to break it up, I'm like, oh, not here, not that's not what we're trying to do. And of course, that only amplified the situation even more, because there's someone who didn't understand and someone who's not speaking the same language, hopping into this, trying to mediate something that didn't even need real mediation, right? If you really think about it. So just thinking about, how timeless these things are, like how much that, we really are learning until we go. And I think that, this is something that people now, I'm really, really starting to see more as something that people as a whole are working on, being able to manage, how far they step into certain things, when they step into certain things, when they walk away from certain things. And I think that for my generation, it is harder. I would love that you brought up the fact that we have cell phones and access to each other all the time. We have access to, possibly feeding whatever opinion we have. We have, for whatever it is. It could be something that is just interpersonally that's going on in our brains that we're, thoughts that we need to feed. And, an algorithm is an algorithm. So anything you feed it, it will, give you what you want back. And so, very, very interesting stuff. And I thought that, over time you kind of get over it and you don't have time for that. But I think that it honestly shows up a lot more than we think and then we know when we're adults too.
Yep. Please.
So
Listen,
I've been awoken to that now, and I'm like, damn, like let's find a nice sweet spot here.
yeah,
Especially
I
as
think
someone who
it's
works in
hard for
conflict.
people.
We
Yeah.
work in conflict, so
But I
it's
think
tough.
it's hard for people. I see it did not start with your generation, but people running toward things like fights, physical fights or arguments, that rather than, and they're not running towards it to break it up. They're running towards it to film it or to amp it up.
Yeah.
I mean, there really are a tremendous amount of instigators out there. But when I was growing up, the biggest thing was somebody who wanted to see certain people fight, and then they would amp it up. They would go and tell somebody, put themselves in the middle of whatever is going on in order for that to happen.
Yeah,
but
definitely a lot of that in my generation.
There's still a lot of that.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course, on a professional and just like minuscule daily scale. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, too many people want to see something happen. And if that is you, we got something for you, right? to talk about that a little bit. But I also grew up, unfortunately, in a family where they kept stuff going. So what I saw adults do, witnessed a lot of, was calling each other on the phone, because we do that. We did that in our generation. We still do.
Still do it.
In my generation,
you still do it.
Y'all are the texting, we're the telephone picking it up. But calling each other on the phone and spreading gossip, or sitting around and spreading gossip, and and never talking about themselves, always talking
Yeah,
about
that's just,
some conflict somebody else had
yeah.
with the other person in the family. It was a lot of family drama when I grew up. So I grew up knowing that that kind of inserting yourself into somebody else's conflict did not stop at a certain age. And in fact, it just went on way too long as far as I was concerned for adults that should have known better than to just keep drama going. And so I know that, hey, anybody could be there. It could be someone who's watching this right now. Hopefully, you tuned in to say, hey, I know I'm in the middle of something I shouldn't be in the middle of and would love some tips on getting out or things to think about, because that's definitely what we want to do here. Because, coming up, I saw a lot of things that should never have happened and would never have happened if people just simply talked to one another. And if you're not the person who inserted yourself and someone brought you in, then one of the things you want to think about too is just like, how do I get them to talk to each other instead and be able to insert myself out of this? Because a lot of people avoid conflict. They don't want to be
Yeah.
involved in it, so they'll bring somebody else in the hopes that they can like do the heavy lifting of the conversation that needs to be had. And the truth is, the best conversation is always going to be between the people who are in the conflict. I can see every now and then you might need a mediator, but primarily people should be able to talk to one another and not bring someone in the middle of it. So if you are in the middle of it, though, yeah, we've got some thoughts on some things that you might want to be thinking about.
Right. So if you've been thrown in the middle, first thing you want to do is ask yourself how you got there, right? So this is if you've been thrown and just inserted into this situation. You look left, you look right. How did I get here, right? Ask yourself, how did I get here? And I think that just a lot of the questions that we ask to ourselves first really can inform how things play out after. Like I really am big at, we really are big on focusing on self first before you,
Right.
go about how you handle these conversations and conflicts after that. So in asking yourself just how you got there, it's just like one of those things where, you can honestly start to decipher, did I put myself in this situation, right? Possibly. If so, what is that really about? What's the deeper meaning behind that? Is there something about maybe drama that I like, or something about the dynamic, right? These are just questions that I think are important and are informative for how you go about mediating possibly how other people could be thinking or feeling in that situation.
Yeah, I think you got to run the tape back for yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, how did I get here? Because what I found, a lot of people who are in the middle but didn't insert themselves, you're there because you're the person who has played that role
Yeah.
before, right? And you seem to not know how to say no when you're asked to be in the middle of something. And you've got to really think about, so if you are here right now saying, how did I get here and I don't want to be here, then you've got to really rewind that tape. Take your steps back. What happened? And then once you know what happened, you can think about, then what do I need to do the next time that I'm asked? Because if I'm not liking being in the middle, then I need to change that. And maybe people are just always thinking I'm the one that they should come to, and I need to be able to change and not be that one.
Right.
Because they need to really be able to work things out on their own.
Yeah. I think that comes down to like an energy thing, right? What kind of energy are you putting out there, right? Even people that, I think mediation in certain situations too can look like even just being present for the conversation, not even trying to like maneuver how things go, or play referee, right? I think that it's, especially with heightened situations with guys, right? Like we definitely mediate sometimes just with our presence, being there. And I think that it's one of those things where, right, you can say, what about being in that environment, being in that dynamic, being in that role makes me honestly attracted to it, and then enough to possibly attract that for other people to want me to be there in these pictures, right? When we think of these things, I think of these scenarios as pictures, right? Who's in the picture, and let's look at the full of it. So yeah, that's definitely one, and I think that's huge. Next, be honest. I think that when you ask yourself these questions, I think when you go to these depths, when you go to these lengths within yourself, you want to be honest with yourself, right? So I know that there was a time, definitely for me where, drama was fun. Drama was cool.
I'm glad you
Drama,
say that.
drama was cool. Drama was fun. It seemed like I got more done socially. It seemed like somehow, some way, things were more fun socially at a time, right? Just by being around stuff or getting thrown in the middle of it, right? And somehow looking for an out, right? Not even necessarily taking myself out of the situation, but letting it play out until I felt like, I could just kind of like let it die, right? So even that has its own forms of like enabling of, being in certain situations that you really don't need to be in. And I think that, definitely in those, younger years and, when you have a lot less to lose, it's a lot more fun. But I think that I had to do the work to be honest with myself, to say even just that. Like there was a time where that was fun in my life and that was cool, and whatever came with that was fun or cool, regardless of whether there was the impact of actions and of things that were said and all that stuff was, hurtful or not. And that's a tough place to get to, but I think that, and it takes time. It takes time for, everyone. It takes different lengths of time and, all these different things. But, I know for me that once it became not cute anymore, I was like, why was it cute even in the first place? And I had to be honest about, what that meant, what it was serving in my life at that time. And it served a lot of things that at, a certain point, I'm like, it's not serving me in those ways anymore. So that's just some work to do, that I've done. But definitely if you're finding yourself caught in the middle of stuff, if you find yourself even enjoying being in the middle of certain things and, watching things play out and letting things die out, all right, all these different things, I think these are important questions to ask and be honest with yourself when you come to an answer.
I think I'm glad you started with that, because I think a lot of people have a problem being honest about the fact that they just love drama. I will say that my aunt, God bless her, my aunt Della, she was always honest about her stuff. And I mean, she was well later in her 50s, where she was just like, I still love a good fight, like a fist fight. She was talking about, like, she liked being in the middle of stuff. And I think there's a lot of us out there that got to own up to the fact that you like being in the middle and until you no longer like it, right? And being honest about what it fulfills for you is going to be your important way out. Even if you were not even if you did not place yourself in it, be honest about why you keep getting in it. Or maybe this was really your first time, because everybody got to have a first time. Be honest about how you got in this, because right now what you're saying to yourself is you want out. So you got to be honest with yourself about how you even got in here and whether you really do want out, right? Never again to return in the middle of somebody else's conflict, or is just this one isn't turning out the way you hoped that it would and you want out of it. And maybe you will get in another person's conflict again. But you got to be honest with yourself about why you're in this one.
For sure. Yeah. And lastly, remove yourself and stay out of it. So I think that, alluding to a point that I was making with being honest, right? I think that a lot of people, when in these situations, in these dynamics, are, thrown in the middle, they kind of wait for things to die out, as opposed to literally saying, I'm done with this. I don't want to be involved in this anymore. I don't want to know, what people are thinking or feeling around what's going on, right? As in, like, don't talk to me about it, like, switch the topic any chance you get, all those things. And I think that, honestly, there's a lot of power in removing yourself, right? I think it shows ownership of your energy. I think it shows ownership over the preservation of your energy. And I think that it shows, honestly, a lot of discipline in the sense of I can think and feel however I feel about the situation, about whoever's involved and all these things. And I know that literally in my role, literally in my capacity, expressing that doesn't really add or do anything for the situation necessarily positive.
Right.
So, not necessarily negative, but not necessarily positive. So I'm just going to leave, right? I'm going to keep to myself and keep my thoughts to myself, or just move on. And I'm going to stay out of it. I think also the staying out of it piece is really important in the sense of, especially the closer we are to certain people, right? Depending on the relationship dynamics, it's easy to say one day, I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to whatever about it. And then that friend could come back to you the next day or the next week and give you some sort of update that maybe you didn't ask for, but you definitely didn't stop them when they gave it to you.
Tell you to get back involved.
Whatever. I don't know about that, but whatever. Whatever it is, right? Like, I think that it's easy to get sucked back into, just even being a bystander in these things, right? Kind of being a witness to these things. And, that enough sometimes is being in the middle of someone's conflict, right? Being a part of the audience, right? Sometimes that's more than enough. And so I think staying out of it, removing yourself, I think that shows a lot of power, a lot of discipline, a lot of ownership over you. And, definitely something that we need a lot more of, right? I think even, like I said, holding space and not necessarily being a referee or a moderator, right? Like, you can listen or whatever it is and still, I don't have an opinion or I don't have anything for you, right? I'm just here offering the space that you clearly need to get this out, right? And, I think there's a lot of preservation and power in that, personally.
Yeah, I think you've got to learn how to remove yourself, right? So okay, look, you were brought in, right? This is for people who were brought in. You were brought in, you said yes for whatever the reasons. Now you want out. You've got to be able to say, listen, I really am not finding that I'm helpful in this situation, and I'm going to remove myself. Don't ghost them and just not respond, right? Because then that simply says that you really don't know how to have the conversation. It doesn't have to be a soliloquy. You don't have to do a long piece on why you are removing yourself, but you do want to say, I'm removing myself out of this. And then you may have to deal with some consequences, but the consequences will hopefully stop once you stay out of it. And not just this one, but some that come in the future too, that you really know you shouldn't be involved in, and someone is just putting you in there, even though it may feed something in you. Ultimately it's not where you want to be. So you've got to be able to say, I'm out.
Yeah,
right.
For sure. Yeah. That's good stuff. And that was 3 things to consider if you've been thrown in the middle, right? Nothing to do with you. But now we've got some things to consider if you have inserted yourself in the middle of someone else's conflict. And the first thing is,
ask yourself why. Why are you in this?
Yeah.
What is it that this is doing for you? What is the reason that you are telling yourself that it is so important for you to be involved?
Yeah.
I think it's for whatever reason, I think it's hard for instigators to say that's who they are and that's what they're doing. I've known quite a few.
And you people need to be the most honest with yourselves more than anyone on this planet, just to be very clear. The instigators, I'm speaking specifically to you, y'all have some real work just around yourselves to do around calling it for what it is, right? We all just got to be able to call it for what it is. So I had to say that because I know some people personally in my life where it's like they know they're the instigator, they can say they're the instigator, and then when we call them an instigator, it's like, oh my God, like since when am I an instigator? Like, what do you mean? And it's like, right, what did I do? It's like, okay, you're not going to manipulate the situation. Like, that's not how that works.
Yeah. So you got to ask yourself why you're always doing this. If you are the instigator, or why you're always inserting yourself into people's conflicts. If you're thinking you're helping, you're actually disempowering them to be able to handle their conflicts on their own, right? To be able to get the tools to have the conversation to help resolve the conflict. Why are you doing this?
Yeah, absolutely.
And own your role. What is your role? When you insert yourself, what is your role? Are you there to be, I don't know, an elder? If you're an elder, are you there to be a friend? Are you there to be a sibling? Are you there to be someone that can help them mediate this, right? Help them to resolve it. What is your role? When I say own it, I mean even the role of making it worse, right? I stepped in and I made this worse. I mean, like I said, I grew up with the best of those who would insert themselves into somebody else's conflict. And I've never really asked or got a chance to ask the question. I approached it much more judgmentally. I just like, stop doing this. But really owning the role of someone who has made this worse, and then doing what you can to repair, including getting the hell out of the situation, is important. Because when you confront someone like you, when I confront someone like you, the last thing that you tend to want to do is to own what role you've played in the conflict. And you got to do that in order to get out and stay out, which you may have something to say about owning the role.
Yeah, for sure. I think, this brings me back to, the situation that I brought up on the show, right? In which, I had inserted myself in, looking out for one of my boys, thinking, he might be in a unsafe situation, right? And turns out it's just him and his boy getting passionate about something that only they know about, right? So I really had to, not only ask myself why I did that, right, and do some work there, but also own my part in that, as someone from the outside looking in who didn't understand what was going on, coming in and inserting myself in that situation, and in the way that I did, only granted a very warranted response in heightened energy, at least, right? And of course, even though, I think this is the cool part, right? We were able to have a conversation. I was able to own that. And even they were able to own their part of turning the situation up even more from there.
Right.
So from there, they were like, and while that makes sense to us, understand for us how when you did this, this is where our minds went. This is where our energy went, and all of this. And we were very much able to just come to an understanding of where people were, what made them do what they did, and they were able to own their part. And actually, these are people that I've actually grown to come close to too, right? So like, and my relationship with my boy only got closer because he sees more than ever, like, anything you need, I'm there for you, right? All these different things. And so I think when you're able to own your part, of course, not everyone's going to give you that grace of that conversation, of that, openness, of that honesty and vulnerability to say, I did this, or I own that this might have, messed up the situation, right? Made it messy. And while you get that opportunity, see that really for, the blessing that it is, and the opportunity to learn, right? To learn moving forward, how to move in similar situations, with people that would respond differently, all these different things. It only informs how you move forward. So I definitely support owning your role. At the end of the day, we have to live with us. We have to live with our own actions. So we have to be real with that. We have to be honest about that. So,
and I see a lot of young people inserting themselves because they feel like it can make them feel more important and feel better about themselves. And believe me, getting into somebody else's conflict is not a great way to feel better about yourself, unless what you are there to do is to mediate, and that's what you do well. But you really need to know what you're doing as a mediator, because most people who might call themselves a mediator are not really mediating,
Yeah.
and they are just turning up the conflict little by little. It's important to know who you are in this conflict and why you continue to insert yourself into conflicts, and what it is that is missing for you if this is what you continuously do.
Yep, for sure.
Remove yourself and stay out of it. Yeah, this is a repeat because it's the same thing if you are in the middle of it and finding that you put yourself in the middle of it and you want out of it. First of all, I think it's important to really, because these are folks who've inserted themselves. So I think it's important for you really to start looking at understanding what you are doing, right? Why you really have to be in the middle of somebody else's conflict. Is it in order to feel something? Is it in order to be something? Is it to just be relevant, to be not forgotten, to be important, to be someone that people turn to? I don't know. I just know that if you're not enjoying the ride, then stop hopping in the car, right? Just take yourself out. Say, look, not out, but just say, look, I know I've inserted myself in this mess, but I am stepping out of the mess. But also understand where you are in the conflict when you're stepping out. Because those of you who turn up the heat and then you jump out, you know exactly what you're doing.
Yeah.
So don't make it worse. If it's already worse, do your best to make it better before you remove yourself from the situation, and then stay out. Don't get dragged back in, no matter how much you want to be a part of it. Don't ask people for updates on the conflict, no matter how much you want to be a part of it. I mean, I think that this is a really difficult one for a lot of people, because you see people responding on social media in situations like you, it's not even that you don't know the person. The person is celebrity, and they never respond to you or anybody else. But you got to put your 2 cents in to this conflict situation. And it's amazing to me how many people feel as if they are really in this situation, and what they say really matters to these folks. And my experience is it doesn't really matter. It matters to you that somewhere you can say that you've said this, that you've made this comment and posted it on this person's post. But the thing is, learn how to scroll and not comment. Learn how to scroll and not comment. That removes yourself, and that keeps you staying out of it when you learn to do that.
Yeah. I just second everything you said pretty much. There's a lot of power in staying out of it, removing yourself, and you know, it's just nothing but energy preservation. It takes a lot of energy to like even just be in the middle of someone else's conflict. Like that takes energy to show up anytime one of them needs you or both of them need you in that moment, whatever it is, right? It takes a lot of energy. So
Yeah.
I definitely would say that that's a good repeat.
Yeah. And I'm going to say something else too. Sometimes we're in the middle of something that we recognize is pretty serious, right? So one of the things that can happen if it's a relationship that's violent or something like that, then removing yourself may mean that you have to make sure that the person is safe in some way, whether it's that you've given them information for something, or that while you're removing yourself from being in the conflict, you're not removing yourself from their life so that they're not isolated by the person who maybe have them in this situation. But staying out of it can be difficult, but you also don't want to be the one who inflames the situation. So staying out of it may mean continuing to get resources for that person and continuing to make sure that they have them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think, just my final thoughts on this. I think that a lot of the resolution that comes from these external forces, right, uh, is really interpersonal. I think that a lot of how we move forward and a lot of how we support each other and a lot of how we still support ourselves in the midst of these things, right, comes from asking those important questions of ourselves, right? What's my role in this? You know, what about this do I like? What about this do I not like? Um, Even the favorites question, do I have a favorite, in this? And, maybe how are my thoughts, swayed towards possibly their reality or their thoughts becoming more of reality? How could I possibly help that subconsciously or consciously? I think all of these questions are so informative for really just how we show up in the world, and especially in the world when stuff gets rocky. I think that you can find out a lot about yourself asking yourself questions when you honestly don't even have a dog in the fight, right? It's just like you're just there witnessing uh, some sort of bash, and I think there's value in that. There's a lot of value and power in taking over your own mind and taking over your own body and literally how you and what you insert yourself in. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think that is just it's there's a lot of folks involved in things that they should not be involved in, from the small to the large. And it's important for us, I think, as a society moving forward, that if we're getting in the middle of things, that it's to make things better. And then that's in fact what we're doing. And when I say that, it means that somebody could ask you in to make things better, but at some point, if that's not what's happening, then we've got to own that a lot of what's going on, people inserting themselves into each other's conflicts, is not making things better. It's in fact making things a lot worse. And if you have time to always be involved in someone else's stuff, then you have time to turn your attention to your own stuff, because we've all got it. We're all working or should be working on something to make ourselves better. And so get yourself out of other people's conflicts and really make sure that you are handling what is on your end of things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's what I got to say. I'm hoping that anybody who is involved in somebody else's conflict, you decide today, I'm out, and I'm going to let them know that I'm out, and move out and stay out.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much for joining us. We had another great episode. Thank you for co-hosting with me, of course.
Absolutely.
To watch more of Working It Out Across Generations, you can catch us on E360TV.com, Trajectory Channel, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, and more.
Big screen.
Yes, on your big screens. But we also do appreciate the comments, the likes, everything that's been coming in. We see it all. So thank you.
Yes.
Catch us on Facebook, Working It Out TV show. We're also on YouTube, Working It Out Across Generations, and LinkedIn as well at Working It Out Across Generations. And again, thank you so much to anyone who's ever watched, shared, commented, liked, whatever form of engagement you've given us. Truly, small is all. We believe that over here. So all of this is adding up and has added up already to just some great revelations from people and great revelations in us, and how we show up for each other. So please know that we are all learning here. We're all living and learning, experiencing as we go, and as we are still here breathing and blessed to breathe. So thank you so much. And yeah,
well, I want to say, I don't think we took the time to say this. that we are an award-winning show. Thank you, all of you who contributed to us. We are the Rising Star Award from Trajectory TV, working it out across generations, Q1, Q2, 2024. So thank you for making us that. You are watching the award-winning Working It Out Across Generations. Dr. Lynne signing out.
I'm Justin, and we'll see you next week.